Well, thank you, Luis, and thank you, Anita, and also a thank you to Atiba, who made the introduction, and to the Inroads community and family. I am also an Inroads alumni from my time at UCLA. My first Inroads internship was at Robinson's May, which later on got bought out by Macy's, and I was in the boys 8 to 10-year-old buying department for the summer of 2002 to 2003. I remember that experience, and Inroads was vital to me in my professional growth and development. So I'm just so happy to be able to give back in this way. We have a lot to cover today. I'm going to be introducing you to a technique that I've developed called interviewing. We all know what an interview is, but today I'm going to help guide you through an introspective process. And because we have a short amount of time, oftentimes I lead these in full day workshops. Today I'm just going to really be giving you the context and then the core questions that you need to be asking yourself, and create space to ask yourself and interview yourself to get the answers that you need to make the next best decision for yourself going forward in the context of your career. So I just want to start off really quickly with my story. My story begins in Oakland, California, where I grew up as a son of two doctors, an oral surgeon and an anesthesiologist. So growing up, everybody thought that I was going to be a doctor too, and I wasn't necessarily going to be going into the business world in the way that I have. But growing up, after seeing my parents' lifestyle, I realized that that wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I know because all of us are members of Inroads that we come from communities of color, and growing up, the ideal family that everybody was aspiring to be was the Cosbys. You know, they had two professionals as the heads of household, a doctor and a lawyer. And while it was nice, and a lot of people love the Cosbys, I'll be honest with you that I actually hate the Cosbys. And I say that jokingly because, you know, I had two professionals as the heads of household in my life, and we didn't have the Cosby family. My parents got divorced when I was 1 year old. And the thing about the Cosbys is they had these two professionals who were working who had these extremely demanding jobs, but for some reason they were home in the middle of the day all the time. And that just never made sense to me. And I know some of you are thinking about starting families. Some of you have already started families. And it's hard to aspire to the Cosbys to have these high demand jobs and still be home in the middle of the day, right? And so the Cosbys painted the positive side of the American dream, but they didn't paint the full picture. And oftentimes, because we have expectations of trying to achieve that kind of success, a lot of us feel like we're falling short of that, and that's not possible for us. And today I want to share with you some techniques to help you be more intentional about the design of your life, in the same way that you design your meals, the same way you design your wardrobe, in the same way that you design your room. I want you to start thinking about, or your apartment or your home, I want you to think about how I design my life. Now, for many of us, we were taught that in order to achieve the American dream, all we had to do was just add more money. Just go get the highest paying job that you can possibly get in a fast track entry level career, and you're going to be able to have the American dream. And I learned pretty early on that it wasn't just about having money that was going to allow you to have the dream. And I'll share with you my definition of the dream towards the end of tonight's call. So for all of us on this call, as high-performing, young, talented professionals of color, many of us were taught to take the easy road. And the easy road was be good, get good grades, go to a good school, and get a good job. And that's what we all did. We followed those steps. And a good job in today's world and in people's minds often meant finance, marketing, accounting, business development, or consulting. And many of us have succeeded at checking off that box. But for some reason, even though we've gotten that far, many of us are unfulfilled in what it is that we're doing on a daily basis. And we have to start to explore and ask ourselves why. And the reality is that when you look at the way we think about careers, oftentimes we let our careers be dictated by other people, whether it was on-campus recruiting, whether it was just the Inroads selection pool and who was offering jobs and who they had partnered with. And as a result, we were selecting our careers from a very limited menu. And you are all Inroads alumni now, so you've been through your first job after Inroads, and hopefully you got a chance to go work with your sponsor for a period of time, but now you're starting to have some feelings about, you know what, maybe this isn't it. This was a great beginning for me and I loved it while I was here, but I'm starting to think about what's next for me. And so when you look at the career choice circle, oftentimes we choose careers from this small circle in the middle, which is careers we know exist and think we know a lot about. And the only way you really know a lot about a career is by doing it and interning. And that's what Inroads offered us, an opportunity to really get to understand what a particular job that we were interested in was all about. But then there's a larger circle around that, which are careers we know exist, but we know we don't know anything about. So I know a firefighter exists. I know they put out fires and they save cats from trees. But beyond that, I don't really know what a firefighter does on a daily basis, what their day-to-day work is. And so because we don't know this, we actually cut that off from our possibilities. And where I want to push you at this stage of your career, where you're thinking about what's next for you, is the larger circle, which is career paths you don't even know exist. Therefore, you don't know anything about. These aren't career paths that recruit on campus. These aren't career paths that recruit out of business school. These aren't career paths at sexy companies and Fortune 500 companies. These are career paths at companies that you drive by on the freeway. You see their logo and their name on a building, but you have absolutely no clue what that company does and how they're creating value in the world. And the only way that they're going to have their name on a building is if they're creating some significant value and solving some problem for some individual organization out there in the world. And so my challenge to you is when you see a new company or you hear a new company's name, I challenge you to stop. In the same way you use Google for everything else, I challenge you to stop, Google that company, and see what it is that they're doing in the world, how big they are, what kind of problem that they solve, what industry are they in, what's their revenues. And I think by doing this exercise alone, you'll start to expand what's possible for you and your career going forward. So when we're taking easy road, we're kind of left with two choices. We're left to hustle now or hustle later. And because many of us took easy road, we're in a space where, you know what, we realize if we stay on this particular road, we're going to end up hustling very hard later. You are all on this call because many of you are experiencing the quarter life crisis rather than the midlife crisis. And the midlife crisis is really about hustling later, realizing that the clock is ticking and you don't feel like you've made a meaningful contribution to the world except making a lot of money, right? And so my journey has really been about hustling now. And I know that if I hustle now, I'm going to have an easier time later. It's almost like bowling. If you've been bowling in the past year or so, you know that if you are off target early on, the chances of you getting in the gutter are very high. But if you are on target early on, the chances of you striking big in life are huge. And so for those of you who know my story, I know some of you are on this call are familiar with my story. At the age of 18, I bought a Mercedes-Benz. I bought a 1990 190E, the same one that you see from coming to America, with the black one with the tan interior. And I bought that car because I bought into my parents' definition of success, right? And that definition was do better than your parents. And many of us have been taught that, especially as first-generation college students and as first-generation corporate young professionals. And so because both my parents had Mercedes-Benzes, I thought that I needed to have one. It was actually the only car that I had ridden in growing up. So if my parents had a nice house by the age of 35, then I had to have one by 30. If they had a nice car by the age of 25, then I had to have one by 20. And so to show them that I was on a path to success, I went and bought this as my first car. And 2 weeks after getting it, I was actually held up at gunpoint. Without words being exchanged, the keys were exchanged and the car was gone. I put all my savings into that car and I was dead broke. I mean, literally wrote checks that came back insufficient funds. Fortunately, that summer, I was an RA, and so I had housing and food taken care of. If those two things weren't in place, I would have continued to fall through the cracks. And there was no more partying for me that summer, and I was in my dorm room for a large part of that summer. And that's when I went into this deep introspective place. And the first question I'd ask myself was, why the heck did I buy a Mercedes-Benz? I could have bought a Honda Civic, and it would have been all good, right? Second question I had to ask myself was, whose definition of success was I living? And it was clear that only in hindsight that I was living my parents' definition of success or other people's definitions of success for me. And the third question I had to ask myself is, what's my definition of success? So around that time, I started hustling for my life and the life that I wanted to create and started to be more intentional about my life as a whole. So that changed the way I navigated my time at UCLA and it changed the way I thought about my career going forward. So at at that time, I just finished my first year at UCLA, and I got this crazy idea to graduate in 3 years. I had enough credits and enough units, and I could map it out in such a way where I could do that and save myself $20,000 in student loans. And so I got aggressive, and I did. And that was really, at the age of 19, was the first real intentional choice that I made for my life that wasn't dictated by someone else. I wasn't trying to please my parents. I wasn't trying to please society. I wasn't trying to please teachers. This was actually a decision that I made for me. It was unique. I hadn't seen anyone else do it before. And so it was only at the age of 19 that I was really starting to make intentional choices about my life. From my time at UCLA, I went and worked in nonprofit for 2 years. And then I went on to business school at Stanford, where I got my MBA and master's in education. So it was that experience that really started to get me hustling for my life and for what I wanted to create. And that's what I really train people to do. I think that hustling is going to be the most valuable skill in this marketplace that we're in. This marketplace that is uncertain, that has fluctuations that go up and go down. But the person who's going to be able to survive in this kind of economy is the person who knows how to hustle. And the way I define a hustler is it's anyone who uses their unique gifts, talents, strengths, and skills to create and capture value in the world through who they are and what they do. Luis prefaced the call with saying that, you know what, the greatest challenge that many of us have is the gap between who we are and what we do. Many of us are driving to work on a daily basis and leaving half of ourselves in the parking lot and dragging the other half of ourselves into the office. And what I find is that when you're able to bring more of who you are to what you do, not necessarily meaning change jobs, but just figuring out how can I be more of who I am, the same person that I am with my friends, how can I bring more of that into my corporate culture, I find that people are more satisfied. And it's not money that closes that gap, it's us that closes that gap. And that gap is what I call the greatest depression. That gap is the greatest depression. The wider that gap is, the more depressed and sad we feel about the life that we have despite what we're getting paid on a daily basis. And so we know one of the people who has kind of coined the term hustling and gets identified as a hustler because of all the amazing deals that he's been able to create, whether that's the Barclays Center, whether that's Samsung, whether that's HP computers, whether that's with Reebok, etc., is Jay-Z. And one of my favorite Jay-Z quotes of all time is, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman." And the reason that quote is so powerful is because what it's saying is that you in and of yourself are a business. And what I'm challenging you to do right now is start to think about yourself outside of the context of the brand or the company that you're working for. Oftentimes we go after these big brand names, Fortune 100 and 500 companies, and we hide ourselves behind that brand, when in fact your brand could be just as powerful as that larger brand. And so, we go to the best schools because we want to associate ourselves with a good brand. We go to this company because we want to have a good brand on our resume. And when in fact, you in and of yourself are a brand and have to start thinking about your life as a business independently of your employer. Because we don't know what could happen to your employer. You could get let go, not because your employer doesn't like your performance, but because the economy turns and shifts. And we saw that over the past 5 years. And so we have to always think of ourselves as businesses and always be positioning ourselves for the next best opportunity. Now, I recently did some research on side hustlers or from our generation and asked who they thought were the top hustlers. And the top hustlers came out to be Oprah, Jay-Z, Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, Beyonce, Warren Buffett, Diddy, Mark Zuckerberg, Russell Simmons, and Mark Cuban. And what you'll notice about these people is that, first and foremost, none of them climbed a corporate ladder to get to where they are. Right? None of them. They all created and hustled their way to the lifestyle that they ultimately had. What you'll also notice about this particular group of people is that even though they have big companies associated with them, they've put their personal brand in front of their organizational brand. So I knew about Warren Buffett before I knew about Berkshire Hathaway, right? And so that's one thing that's unique about what our generation sees as the top 10 hustlers. And so for many of you, it's not that you hate your job. It's not that you hate your company. It's not that you hate what you do. The reality is that you've evolved and you just outgrown the cubicle that you were put in. And that's not a bad thing. That means that you're growing. And you also are starting to get this feeling based on what you're seeing in terms of Generation X and the people who are ahead of us in their careers, that your ladder might be leaned up against the wrong wall. You're not really sure whether or not what you want is actually at the top of that ladder. And so and then you're also wondering, is that ladder actually going to get me to my highest potential, even if I climb there and make it to the top? There's an assumption in older generations that we all want to be CEO. And I know that based on the lifestyle design that some of us want to create, that's not a reality, and that we want to find our nook within the context of an organization, which is a different approach to careers than what has occurred in the past. And so this notion of the 40/40 Club is closed. And, the 40/40 Club is one of Jay-Z's businesses. But I like to say that the 40/40 Club is out of business because the idea of working for one company for 40 hours a week for 40 years is no longer a reality. That actually worked for my father. My mother has had multiple jobs, but we just don't see that anymore. And so we all have to be in preparation for this constant turnover, this constant change. And the process that I think will help us make the next best step is the interview. And what we as a generation are really looking for from work is these three things. We want to be able to create value, we want to be valued, and we want to do work that aligns with our values. And so as you think about your next opportunity, you want to make sure that you can check off the box for each of these three things. And for us, it's not just about maximizing the dollars and cents, right? When you look at LeBron James and Wayne Wade and Chris Bosh, who just won their second NBA title, all of them took significant pay cuts in order to do something more meaningful than be known as the highest paid players in the league. Right? They took pay cuts in order to do that. And what I know about us is that in this new type of worker and this person who's hungry for change and growth is that it's not just about making the most money, it's also about making meaning in the world. Now, we are facing some pretty tough times, especially from a generation standpoint. So if you look at your own financials in the same way that you might look at a company's financials or a company's balance sheet, we're in a pretty tough situation because, for instance, revenues are going down. Labor's share of the marketplace is decreasing. CEO pay went up 16%, whereas labor's pay only went up 0.25% in the past year. CEOs on average are making $5,000 an hour. So they, in 11 hours of work, they're making what the average American family makes, and that's not happening for the rest of us. Expenses are going up. The cost of housing, healthcare, food, fuel, education, all those things are on the rise. So our income statement is shot. It doesn't look good at all. And then when you think about our balance sheet, for the same household led by someone 35 years or younger in the 1980s, they would have a 68% more assets than we do today. And a lot of that has to do with the increase of our liabilities and the student debt as the cost of college continues to rise. So we're in some pretty dire situations, and that's why I do a lot of work in terms of helping people develop their side hustles outside of the workspace. Because for me, this is actually the sidehustle.com logo, and what you'll see is that the S is like the economy. The economy is going to go up and down whether we like it or not. There's no way that we can, as an individual, control that. But then on the bottom is your main hustle, and then above that is your side hustle. And your side hustle puts you in a better position than if you only have one source of income. And I really think that it's dangerous to only have one source of income, no matter how much money you're making, because oftentimes we design our lives in such a way where our cost of living rises with our income, and that doesn't actually create financial freedom. So what I want to challenge you all to think about of yourselves is that you're already entrepreneurs, and that your current employer, your main hustle, is simply just your biggest client, but it's not your only client or your only source of income. So I know that many of you think you want to be entrepreneurs. The reality is that only 10% of you will really make that step at any given time. So the rest of us have to ask ourselves, how do we embrace our entrepreneurial spirit, even if we choose to work within the context of companies? And so one way to do that is to think about your career in this way. A career means creating amazing results even entrepreneurs respect. Right? Creating amazing results, even entrepreneurs respect. Your results are what's going to precede you as you navigate career change in this economic environment. People, even in a down economy, people want to hire people who have results. They don't want to hire people who just know how to follow the steps and do what they're told. They're looking for leaders in this given context. And if you decide to stay as an employee for the rest of your life, that's okay, because there's also this notion of an inside hustler. you don't know who this picture is of, it's actually of Art Fry. Art Fry is, he worked at 3M, and he's the creator of the Post-it note. And he had this idea when at 3M, and it took 3M quite a few years to bring the Post-it note to market. But because of this inside hustler, because of his entrepreneurial spirit, there's an entire factory in Cynthiana, Kentucky that employs hundreds of people and makes most of the world's Post-it notes, even though the patent has expired. And so this is an inside hustler. So for me, side hustling is not about quitting jobs. It's about creating jobs for ourselves and others. And we can also do that as inside hustlers. So now I want to quickly guide you through the interviewing process. Like I said, you know what an interview process is. It's with you at the table and you're looking at other people and they're asking you questions and they're listening for themselves. Interviewing is more about you listening to your highest self. And what will your highest self, your best self, do in a particular situation, whatever situation you're in terms of the context of your career. And so I believe that questions lead to insights, which lead to answers. I used to be quote unquote motivational speaker, and I would try to give you my frameworks for success. But instead, over the past few years, I've actually changed, and my challenge is to really just ask you the right questions to help you come up with your own framework and definition for success for your life, which is unique to you. So oftentimes we ask ourselves the wrong questions, and we have to ask ourselves, how far will the right answers to the wrong questions get us? And when it comes to thinking about career change and navigating our career, oftentimes we ask ourselves the wrong questions. And some of those wrong questions include, what's the base salary? How much is the bonus? Are they recruiting on campus? What are they ranked? Where are you applying to? How many spots do they have? Do you like it there? And while these questions are important, they're actually secondary. And so today I want to actually share with you the primary question that we need to start with before we get into these questions. So my journey in terms of my career has been a circuitous one. I have thought that I wanted to be a party promoter. When I did my internship at Robinsons May, I thought I wanted to do retail. Then I thought I wanted to be an educator like Mr. Belding from Saved by the Bell. I thought I wanted to be an accountant. I've created ideas on campus where I was exploring entrepreneurship. And at one point, I thought I even wanted to be a minister. And while I'm none of those things specifically today, all of those things have actually compiled into what I'm doing as the interviewer. And today I lead events, I help people career shop, I create curriculum, I manage businesses, I create products, and I touch lives. So every step in my career gave me information about what it is that I'm actually doing today. So if you feel that you're in the wrong place, instead of thinking about it in that way, say, what did I learn about myself in this particular job or this particular industry that I can take with me to my next opportunity? Because everything that has happened to you has happened for a reason. Even myself getting held up at gunpoint, that happened for a reason, and it's going to shape what you do going forward in the future. So wherever I go and speak, the first question I ask is, how do you define success? That's where it all begins. And whether we're fully aware of it or not, our definition of success is subconsciously driving every decision that we make. And oftentimes I ask people, how many of you want to be successful? And everybody raises their hands. Yes, I want to be successful. But then I ask, how many of you have written down a one-sentence definition of success before? And all the hands go down. And so it's almost impossible to actually get to our destination or our understanding of success if we've never defined it for ourselves. We're just hoping that we get somewhere and that it hits us. And we're even though we're not in the entertainment industry, a lot of us are still waiting to be discovered. And so one thing I challenge you to do is to come up with your one sentence definition of success. For me, my definition is the alignment of my purpose, which is being who I want to be, my passion, doing what I want to do, and my profit, having enough of what I need to continue being who I want to be and doing what I want to do. And for me, that is success. And I measure that in terms of how many moments of gratitude that I'm experiencing, how many lives I'm touching. Tonight, I get to touch dozens of lives on this call. Every single day, thousands of people visit my website. People are watching my videos and reading my books every single day. And so I'm touching lives. And then I measure my profit in how much bread I break. That's food and financial. I love breaking bread with people and having meals with them, and I love creating financial opportunities for myself and others. So this is my definition of success, and my challenge to you to start with is come up with your definition of success in the 3 ways that you measure it. And I challenge you to avoid vague language like happiness or satisfaction or family. I want you to be very specific in such a way that you can measure it in some sort of way. The next question is, what is your passion? And I know oftentimes we say, follow your passion and the money will follow, but everybody skips a step. It's follow your passion, turn your passion into a skill, and then the money will follow. And I'm going to speed through this for the sake of time on this call, but at the end I'll give you a link that you can go to take the Passion Finder, which is an online exercise that I created to help you get clear on your passion as a skill. A lot of you think you know your passion and can articulate it, but I'm going to challenge you to articulate it as a skill rather than just as a topic. So oftentimes we use passions and interests synonymously where and they're really different. Passions have to do with disciplined practice, whereas interests have to do with half-hearted play. Passions have to do with full time. I do this all the time, every single day, no matter how busy my life is, because I've integrated it into my life, where somebody who's only interested in something does it on their free time. And then passions are action oriented, whereas interests tend to be topic based. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're passionate about sports or baseball, right? Baseball is a general topic, and when somebody says, oh, I'm passionate about baseball, you only think that they want to be a baseball player. But when you look at all the actions connected to baseball, you start to get more specific about that entire economy, right? There's hitting baseball, pitching baseball, collecting baseball cards, studying baseball history, coaching baseball pitchers, announcing baseball games, managing baseball operations, scouting baseball players. See, for every action that I just mentioned, there is a career path connected to that action. When we just talk about baseball in general, it's too vague. And so my challenge to you is to start to think about your passions as actions, because when you think about them as actions, it'll be easier for us to find a career path that aligns with your passion. The next one is food, right? What are all the ways to engage with food? Growing the food organically, writing food reviews, designing food baskets, tasting the food, hosting events around food for the homeless, experimenting with food fusion, hosting food shows, teaching people to cook food healthily. All of these actions have career paths connected to them. But if you just say I'm passionate about food in general, it's too vague and we don't know where to start. So my challenge to you is to think about your passion as an action. And I'll show you how this manifests. So let's say your interest is in food and your passion is actually designing food baskets, right? You might not have needed to go to college for that, but hey, that's what you love doing. And let's say you really are good at doing it with dried goods. Now, you look from there, you start to find companies or career paths that will allow you to do that on a daily basis. And I know you've all heard of edible arrangements. You might have bought an edible arrangement for a friend before, and that's a multi-million-dollar company that designs food baskets. So though it's not a Fortune 100 company, it's not a fast track entry level career, it's not in finance, it's not in banking, it's not it doesn't recruit on campus. There are multi-million-dollar companies doing the most obscure passion. So if anyone tells you that you cannot make a living doing your passion, I have to argue against that. So think to yourself, what word is at the center of your career universe? We just did baseball, we just did food. For you, what is it? Is it chess? Is it bargains? Is it events? Is it people? Is it travel? Is it education, business, or health? What word is at the center of your career universe? And write that word down. And again, I'll give you access to the Passion Finder at the end of the call. The next thing you want to explore is, what problem do you solve? Okay, what problem do you solve? Oftentimes we get hired to a job, but every job that is out there was created to solve some sort of problem. But it's not always clear what that problem is. And so my challenge to you is to get really clear about what problem you solve. And there's two ways to think about that. You can solve problems for individuals, and this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs on the left, or you can solve problems for organizations. So when we think about physiological needs, what kind of companies operate on that level? Walmart operates on that level. Pepsi operates on that level. When we think about belongingness and love, what kind of companies operate on that level? eHarmony operates there, etc. Right? But let's say you don't want to serve individuals. You are more interested in serving organizations. Then you have to ask yourself, how do I help a company improve its marketing and sales, its systems and processes, its finance, or its people? And any problem that I can solve related to that is where I will create my value. And the beautiful thing is that the bigger the problem you solve, the more value that you'll create and the more you'll be able to capture in the world. The reason Bill Gates is the world's richest man is because he solves a huge problem. Right? So if you want to make more money, if that's really one of your goals, then my challenge to you is to solve a bigger problem. It's not just to wait in line and climb the corporate ladder, it's to find a bigger problem to solve. The next question you can ask yourself is, who do you serve and how? right? Just like a company has a target market, you may have a specific niche of people that you are committed to serving, and you're going to derive intrinsic motivation and energy from that. For you, it may be families, it may be women, it may be students, it may be kids. Who is your target market? Who are you committed to serving and giving your life to? For me, it's the millennial generation. It's side hustlers. That's who I'm committed to serving, is helping them manifest their ideas and grow their businesses while still maintaining their careers. All right. The next question is, what do you want to master? All right. What skill do you want to master? And oftentimes we don't know what our skills are. And I'm going to show you a quick technique to really think about your skills. But there's two types of skills. There's skill mastery or there's subject mastery. For instance, Michael Jordan had skill mastery at basketball. That's what made him the greatest player. But Phil Jackson, on the other hand, who has even more rings than Michael Jordan, had subject mastery of the game of basketball. So you have to decide whether or not you're engaged in skill mastery, which is the ability to replicate success at something better than the average person, or do you have subject mastery of something, meaning that you can speak powerfully about it for 10 hours if you had to. And so I want to introduce you to the skills value matrix. And the skills value matrix is oriented in such a way where there's lots of people can do this and fewer people can do this, or this skill is very easy or it's very difficult. And the blue area is, there's only one or two things that I found actually fit in the blue area, which is lots of people can do it and it's very difficult. And that is giving birth and dying. Lots of people can die. We all die. And it's probably very difficult for many people. And then giving birth, half the population can do, but it's very difficult. But there are very few other things that fit into that category. So let's just give you an example. Lots of people know how to navigate Facebook, and it's very easy to do. Fewer people know how to set up a Facebook fan page, though it's very easy to do. And so the question is, how do we push our skills into the upper right, into the green box? Because that's where the value is. So one thing that could be up there is growing a Facebook fan page. That is somewhat difficult, and fewer people know how to do it. That's why there are people out there who get paid to do that on a daily basis. So whatever skills you think you have, you always want to be pushing them to the upper right, which is pushing them in difficulty and to a space where fewer people can do them. Another example is driving a car. Lots of people can drive a car and it's very easy. Fewer people can ride a motorcycle, though it's relatively easy. And then even fewer people can drive a NASCAR, which is driving a car at 200 miles per hour. And that's what makes it difficult. And that's what makes people able to make a living driving NASCAR, right? Another example is lots of people know how to tie a shoe. It's very easy. Fewer people know how to actually polish a shoe. And there are people who get paid to do that because fewer people know how to do it. But then something that's even more difficult that even fewer people know how to do is spray painting shoes. And there are spray painted shoes that go for $200, $300, $400. Right? So as you think about your skills, you always have to think about, how do I push this to the upper right-hand corner? Because that's what's going to make you distinct and unique and valuable in the marketplace. The next question to ask yourself is, who are your pioneers? Meaning, when you look at your career path, who is it that you're kind of modeling or following? And you're not following just to make a Xerox copy of their life, but you're following to eventually lead. And so some of my pioneers are people who are gifted at fostering work engagement and asking questions. So I have Tony Schwartz, I have Jay Krishnamurti, which is a spiritual teacher, and I have Oprah Winfrey, not for her bank account, but for her powerful ability to create safe space and cultivate intimacy, listen, and ask introspective questions, which is what I'm doing with you right now. I learned from her in that way. All the interviews she's had with celebrities all over the world, I really learned from her practice. Right? And so when you think about your professional pioneers, who is it that you're modeling your career path after? And is there a way for you to get in contact with them? Tony Schwartz is actually a mentor of mine. He and I have met before. And so you don't have to be doing this work blindly. You can actually connect with your professional pioneers, and they can save you a lot of time and obstacles and challenges. The next question, we have two more, is, what is your vision for your life? As you think about your next career, before you start making decisions about what's next for you, let's start with your vision and begin with the end in mind. All right? Because at the end of the day, this is what your life is supposed to look like. Supposed to. Right? And a lot of us have been doing a lot of supposed to. I was supposed to take this job. I was supposed to go into corporate America, into this kind of job. And I'm challenging you to get off this supposed to train. All right. So when you think about your life, this is what it's supposed to look like. 1/3 of your life is gone to sleep. That's the black area. Then you have this yellow area, which is your free time. You have a lot when you're little. You have very little when you are a working professional. And then you're supposed to have this big chunk at the end called retirement. And many of you are in this red area right now. It's your 40-year career. And I don't know if some of you actually want to retire early, right? And so we want to figure out, how do we make this red area, because it is a majority of your waking hours, how do we make this red area feel like the yellow area, where you're actually in love with what you do and you're not in a rush to retirement because you love what you do so much. Gallup actually did some research, and the average retirement age of men who live beyond the age of 90 was 85 years old. And why is that? Because they didn't have this hidden tax on their body, on their psyche, on who they were by doing something that they didn't love. They loved what they did so much that they weren't trying to retire at 65 just because that was the retirement age. They loved what they did. My dad, even though he retired from the University of California, San Francisco, still goes to work 3 days a week because he loves what he does so much. Okay? So one way to think about and envision your future is to write your retirement speech. It's a beautiful exercise. Imagine yourself at your retirement, and what would you say to your colleagues and to your industry and to your peers and those that you work with? Think about your major achievements, the companies you worked for, your favorite projects, your career philosophies. Thank your mentors, your colleagues, your teammates, what you hope for the future of your profession, the concepts, ideas, products, and frameworks that you pioneered and championed, and your best day at work, and even maybe your worst day at work. Think about that and envision yourself actually being there. And I challenge you to write the actual retirement speech. This is just the beginning of mine. I'm not going to read it all, but I will share this. When I first started out on January 9th, 2009, I was 26 years old, living in Brooklyn, New York. The United States was on the brink of an economic depression, and I knew that the old American dream had put us to sleep, and now it was time to dream awake. The first leg of my journey involved writing books, speaking nationally, and teaching wherever and whenever I could. The message was simple: seek to give more than you take. So that's just an example of a nugget of my retirement speech. And so when you get some time, I challenge you to do that exercise and envision your future. So finally, on our last question, it's what will be your legacy? What do you want to leave behind besides just a long resume? And there's 4 ways to think about your legacy. There are baby bodies, which are having children, bodies of work, institutional bodies, and your body in service to others. And I'm talking Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa level. And these are actually in order from easiest to hardest. I'm not saying that it's easy to raise children, but it is easy to have them. That can happen in 5 to 10 minutes if you're not careful, right? So this is the challenge is, how do you want to leave your legacy in these 4 different ways? Your body of work is going to be captured in your resume. Your institutional bodies are going to be organizations that you start, scholarship foundations. For instance, Luis and Anita are giving back to Innerview. This is an institutional body that they're contributing to. And then your body in service to others is not about institutions. It's not about your resume. It's not even about your kids. It's about how many people are going to remember you in their hearts because of how you showed up in their lives when you make your transition. And so I want to close with this in terms of dreaming awake. I know that Martin Luther King had a dream, but I know that you all have a dream too. And my commitment is to help every American dream awake. And the way I think about dream is having your desired relationships, employment, and money. Your desired relationships are not just your significant other. It's to yourself, your spiritual source, your partner, your parents, your siblings, your friends, your colleagues, your kids, your boss, right? These are all the different types of relationships that you have. Then there's your desired employment. And I ask myself these 3 questions. Am I able to create value? Am I being valued? And am I doing work that aligns with my values? And for me, all my answers are yes. And then finally, desired money isn't about just having more and more and more, because the game of more never ends. You'll keep playing that forever. My 2 questions are, what is enough for me? And do I have enough? And I've been designing my life in this way. And so I know many of you are in a space where you feel like you hate your job at some times. It's not every single day, right? The first 5 days after the weekend are always the hardest, right? And keep in mind that it's not your job's fault that you are where you are. It's you not showing up in your life and claiming your true power and your true value, right? It's easy to point our finger at our job because we spend a majority of our time in our life there. But in reality, oftentimes I've helped people change careers and they jump from the frying pan to the fire, from one job to the next, and they find themselves in the exact situation because they don't feel fully empowered in terms of being able to create their life in such a way that they want to. And so you have the other 4.0, which are four things at your disposal that you can always use to grow and empower yourself. And that's your personal capital, your intellectual capital, your social capital, and your financial capital. Your personal capital is how well you know yourself, your awareness of your strengths, the things that make you unique, your unique character traits. Your intellectual capital is what you know. These are your skills, your domain expertise in one or two subjects or skills. Then you have your social capital, which is who you know and who knows you. And for those of you who feel like your social capital is limited to your colleagues and just people at your job right now, my challenge to you is to continue to push those boundaries and start meeting people in all different spaces. And then finally, there's your financial capital, which is who knows that you know what you know. And your financial capital grows at the intersection of your intellectual and social capital. The reason I get paid to speak at companies and colleges all across the country is because the right people at those organizations know I know a lot about helping their employees perform at higher levels and stay engaged. And when those two things intersect, my intellectual and social capital, more financial opportunities flow. And so the way I want you to look at your company is to say, my company has intellectual, social, and financial capital too. And I need to be using my company's intellectual, social, and financial capital to grow mine so that when I transition from here, I'm more valuable in the marketplace than I was when I got here. Your company's intellectual capital includes conferences, trainings, events, research, consumer insights, guest speakers. Its social capital includes leaders, mentors, colleagues, clients, associations, and networking events. And then its financial capital that it offers you are benefits, sometimes scholarships to go back to school, 401k matching, and sometimes group discounts. And so you want to use your company's capital to grow your capital so that you are more valuable years later when you make your transition. So with that, my final invitation is for you to join me at sidehustler.com to take the Passion Finder. If you go to sidehustler.com, you'll see a link that says take the Passion Finder under the Start Here menu. And I encourage you to join me there, subscribe so that you get my weekly newsletters. If you believe the things that I've been sharing with you, I continue to share these on a weekly basis. And with that, I would like to open it up the question.